Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, as always, Maheen the podcaster, and tonight I am honored to host a panel to discuss the Muslim reaction to the conversion to Islam by our new brother Andrew Tate. And my guests today really need no introduction, as they've all been former guests. Starting with my earliest guest, Nabeel Azeez. You were on almost 3 years ago. I remember, we recorded in that the Costa Coffee, I think it was, in the Dubai airport.
Yep.
And then more recently we've had Shaykh Abdullah bin Hamid Ali from Zaytuna College making a return to the show, as well as Shaykh Mustafa Umar, who we recorded with just a couple months back when he was in Chicago. So welcome to our esteemed Shuyukh, and also to all you brothers, for having this discussion. I want to pass the ball to Nabeel, because Nabeel, you've been someone in the pro Andrew Tate camp even before his Shahada. Can you and you recently wrote a piece called The Fragrant Dispersion for MuslimMan.com, which is a project you're working on. Can you briefly tell the listeners your interaction with Andrew Tate in general? And if someone were to ask you, so I'll give you an example. A week ago, I asked my wife, "Do you know who Andrew Tate is?" And she was like, "Yeah, I've seen his name pop up. Like, what's his deal? Like, I heard he became Muslim, and that's it. She doesn't know anything else." So I told her, like, the stuff that would probably trigger most people. I was like, "Well, as far as I know, he made his fortune running like a webcam business, like kind of like porn, right? But and he became Muslim recently, and people are upset that he became Muslim." And she was like, "Well, like, who's upset? Like, non-Muslims?" That was her initial reaction, because you're losing someone to the team, right? And I was like, "No, Muslims are upset." And she's like, "Really? What? Why? Like, that's what it's about, like, for Reformation, right?" So I was very happy with that reaction, because it kind of tells me that my wife is still upon, like, some decent fitra. You know what I mean? But I just want to, if someone were to ask you that question, maybe before he was even pre-shahada, who's Andrew Tate? Why don't you give a quick spiel?
Yeah. So the main problem is everybody who's heard of Andrew Tate today, 99.9% of them just heard about him this year. But Andrew Tate has been online for the past 10 years. I've known him since 2015 on Twitter. And so the snapshot that or the understanding that they have of Andrew is only based off of TikTok clips. Whereas, like, we know him in a bit more context. Like, he was always sort of he came, like, he was an atheist before, then he started believing in God, and then eventually he decided to convert. And he always had sort of an interest in Islam after he sort of saw things start to go the wrong way in the West. And, like, I remember me and Abu American, he would like tweet at us and ask us, "Hey, what's the best place to buy hijabs for my women?" his like 15 or 20 women, as like because we're all converting to Islam. It's like the West is finished. Islam is going to win. And so, like, me and Abu American would like tweet him like different hijab shops. I shared like the location of one of the popular hijab malls in Dubai. So that's the snapshot. Like, the people who know Andrew have of him, and that's the people who know him online.
Mm-hmm.
I have actually met him in person. So I wouldn't consider myself a friend or anything like that. We're just acquaintances. He recommended my boxing coach to me when I decided to start boxing. So I have, a soft spot in my heart for him because he's just generally been helpful. And when I met him, he was soft-spoken and introverted. And I say this as another possibly an introvert. Introverts, they tend to perform when they're in front of an audience. It's like a character we switch into. It's the person that we can't be when we're just hanging out and chilling with other people. So I know who Andrew is just in general. as an online figure because I've known him for much longer, and I know Andrew in person because of we've met. And my reaction to when Andrew was not Muslim, and Muslims in particular were clowning him uh, whenever they showed up on his feed. My reaction was very simple. I just posted one sentence. Um, I know Andrew. He and his brother are both gentlemen, and that is my impression of them. Because I actually didn't. I just have a problem with like injustice, just in general, whether it's like towards a Muslim or a non-Muslim, or if somebody's like speaking bad about someone unjustly, like I have to step in and say something. So you just saying the fact that Andrew and his brother are gentlemen
Mhm.
was actually triggering to people. Okay, these like because they have this perception in their mind, and when you counteract that or contradict that, it triggers some sort of cognitive dissonance. So that was a bit rambly, but I hope you get the picture.
Right. Sheikh Abdullah and Sheikh Mustafa, if you guys could elaborate, did you guys have any prior understanding of Andrew Tate? I know Sheikh Mustafa probably doesn't because Sheikh Mustafa, you stay away from social media for the most part.
So well, I do, but I also interact with the youth, the Muslim youth, a lot.
Okay.
So all of my exposure to, I did have exposure to him several months before his conversion, and all of it was coming from my students and the youth that I would meet in the halaqah, and they would be telling me, they're like, do you know who Andrew Tate is? And they'd send me a clip, and they'd be like, watch this, listen to this, look what he said. So yes, I was aware of some of the things. There was the famous clip that where he talked about Islam, and he said, Islam is going to be the dominant religion. He said he's not a Muslim, he's a Christian. He donates to the church in Romania, but Islam is going to be a dominant religion. That went viral around many Muslims. In fact, I had a non-Muslim friend of mine actually send me that clip. Like, you know who this guy is? This guy made an interesting statement about Islam. I'm like, oh, thanks. So I did have a little bit of exposure to Andrew Tate, but that was mostly from people who were sending me stuff or from the youth that I would interact with.
What about you, Sheikh Abdullah?
Yeah, actually, similar to me. I saw the early clips. I saw people sharing them about his comments about Islam. I didn't know who he was. I was like, okay, it's the Andrew Tate guy. Apparently, he's popular. Of course, Muslims, they like anytime they hear a non-Muslim say something positive about Islam, regardless of their state, right? Their politics, etc. Just say, hey, well, somebody likes Islam. Say, hey, this guy's popular. On top of that, it'd be nice, if the person became Muslim. And really, I had only seen the short clips, that people were sharing until about maybe a month or so ago when he was banned from social media and he was being sort of attacked and things like that. And so all of a sudden I was like, well, why are they doing this to this guy? Yeah, I was really interested to try to know what was going on. And then I started to talk to my daughter, 18-year-old daughter, and come to find out that she herself was very familiar with him, right? And she had, so we started to watch some of his long form videos, right? And I come to realize that, oh, this guy is not just sort of one dimensional, right? This guy has many dimensions to himself, right? Now, I of course, I saw some of the more problematic clips as well, right? But I was always concerned with the question of why he was being canceled, like why social media, banks, and all these sort of government sort of establishment and those connected to the government were canceling them. And I came to the conclusion after I heard some of the things that he said about C-19 and about things related to the government, the media, et cetera, that said, that I feel that this is the real reason why I think that there's such a big uproar about him, right? I was convinced that that was really the main issue. Why would they be so concerned about so-called misogyny? I don't think that, that that's ever really been a big deal, right? Rap music, is full of misogyny. And those songs haven't been banned. They still exist, still out there, so that's really was the way that I sort of developed an interest in looking further into his background and And so then of course the conversation started, and the Muslim, sort of highly immature reaction, in my opinion, to his conversion, started.
So as I've changed the trajectory of my channel. Sheikh Mustafa's aware. Like, I used to talk about like these open, like, let's understand how people got to their worldviews, but recently it's been like, I want to help. There's this idea of the deep life, and like helping like Muslim guys self-improve in a way. Deep life is coined by Cal Newport, right? And the reason I think this topic is relevant to that is that the example of Tate's conversion to me is this has now become a fitna for people, of how we understand the basics of Islam. That's been the real red flag, because there's all the straw men being presented, like, oh, I saw some sister on Twitter say, if a non-binary LGBTQ purple-haired leftist anarchist Marxist converted to Islam, this theoretical person, would you guys be in favor? And I didn't reply, but in my head, I remember when Sinead O'Connor became Muslim, I was like, that's great. I mean, anybody becoming Muslim to me is great, because that's the whole point. It's reformation, right? And I think that's where I'm struggling to understand. Now the argument that I'm hearing is that, well, when people convert, they just don't automatically switch things off. It's not like a clean slate from a spiritual angle, from the lens, from the most important lens, to be honest, as Nabeel talks about in his write-up. But the behavior, it's not realistic to expect the behavior to change overnight. And sometimes people they're pointing the stuff he's doing since then, and are still like, oh, look, he's still doing these parties and stuff. But so Sheikh Abdullah, once someone converts to Islam, what is the expectation, if any, for reformation? And is there a timeline? My understanding is always that, like, once you take Shahada, then you kind of work along. Now, you can't, you got to be careful. You don't fall into, go for it again and say crazy stuff like Kyrie Irving. You know what I mean? Right. But, so just what is the expectation for new Muslims, assuming they're coming from, especially per se, let's play devil's advocate, and let's say he is coming from this hedonistic lifestyle, which, by the way, he refuted on the Muhammad Hijab podcast anyways, but let's just say for argument's sake.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the answer to that question is fairly obvious to pretty much every Muslim. Right? They know that there's no time limit for someone sort of, full conversion, right? who's fully converted, right, to Islam, and what does that mean to be completely converted to Islam, right? And because all of us are doing things that we shouldn't do, or at least there's more that we can do to perfect who we are, right, through Islam, right? And we know from the Sahaba, we know the famous statement attributed to Aisha, al-Mu'mineen, about how if Allah had revealed first, don't fornicate, don't drink wine, then the people probably wouldn't have accepted Islam, right? But that's not the way that it went. And I come from a convert community, so I don't necessarily see myself as a convert, but I do believe that every Muslim, even if your parents are Muslim and you were born into Islam, has a conversion experience at some time in his or her life. That a certain, in other words, at that moment we decide that I want to be Muslim and I want Islam in my life. That's a conversion experience, in my opinion, right? All of us go through that. All of us. I was born Muslim. It grew up. It only had the Muslim identity, and I was wayward myself at a time. And I think converts fully understand why it makes no sense to suffer or exhibit so much outrage at the acceptance of Islam of any given person, because they know where they came from. The average convert I've seen may take from 5 to 10 years before they actually develop some level of what we call istiqamah, right? So it just takes a lot of time for that. Now, of course, I think we should be careful not to create a straw man, because you have different types of critics out there of Tate. You know, you have those who, you know, who are just, you can just put them in the category of just Muslim lefties, right? You know, so they don't have any reason to embrace him because of his politics. You know, they don't go along with leftist politics. You know, he likes Trump. You know, he's, you know, et cetera, right? You know, that he actually is not a feminist. He's opposed to feminism, right? So naturally they're going to be against him. But then you have another group of people. Many of those, the second group of people are people who actually studied Islam, you know, and they're here in the books of fiqh and aqidah and things like that, you know, but in my opinion, they're just misinformed or just being disingenuous, not being completely honest with themselves about how much they actually know about Tate himself, right? You know, or perhaps they're just simply, you know, just projecting onto him something, you know, that is just not true, unfortunately. And we've seen that quite a bit. And it's really interesting that you just have this double standard, you know, that you have all of these lefties, right? So we can talk about, okay, what the sins of Tate, right? Yeah, what are his sins? Okay, all right, let's say misogyny is a sin. Let's say, okay, let's say he's hedonistic or he's a narcissist. Let's say there's a lot of things we can say about him. You can get that impression, like when you listen to him. Yeah, he's very mean in the way he spoke to certain women, you know, in his, you know, previous videos and things like that. You know, I guess, you know, part of the shock and way to sort of bring in his audience, whatever. I think that perhaps that was part of it. Allah knows best, but we can also talk about the sins of his critics as well, right? You know what I mean? Because we don't see the same level of outrage. You know, people who are actually in our community who are actually normalizing, you know, homosexual relationships, normalizing transgenderism. You know, they're accepting or actually promoting the indoctrination of our children into these type of ideas, right? And you don't see these same critics, you know, doing posts day after day after day, criticizing those people by name, right? And these individuals, most of the time, have been Muslim for a long time. They actually, some of them born Muslim, right? And so I was like, why him, right? You know, and to me, I was saying, I don't want to sort of course, take up all of the time. I want to give everyone else an opportunity to learn from you as well. But it's to me, I just feel that the worst thing that happened to Muslims in the West was we became involved in politics. Politics destroyed our community, right? It's destroyed our community, and 9/11 really did a job on our psyche, right? You know, so we embraced the idea that was our fault, right? And so fundamentally, we have a crisis of leadership. You have people who are actually in the leadership positions who actually lack the courage necessary to actually speak the truth and guide the community in the right direction, right? You know, but rather we go along. Why? Because again, we're constantly afraid and anxious about, you know, what's going to happen to us from someone in a political position, political office. At any rate, you know, that's much more I can say, but I like to hear from others as well.
I have a question for Shaykh Mustafa, since you mentioned your exposure to him is from the youth, and I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups, and one of my friends is a school teacher in a Muslim school, and you know he had maybe like mentioned his similar experience to you, that his kids or his boys are coming to him inspired by Andrew Tate. He's like, brother, do you know Andrew Tate? Have you heard of him? And that's how exposure. He sees these clips and he's like totally turned off by it, right? And he's like, this is harmful. And what? Let me ask you, because I've consumed Andrew Tate's. I haven't really followed some of the short clips. I've listened to like his long form content, like Patrick Bet David had him on Valuetainment or Fresh and Fit, you know, these different shows. But to me, yeah, he could be, you know, character wise could be a little rough, but overall, even as a 41-year-old man, I'm like listening to his stuff, and there's things I can implement like today. You know what I mean? And so I was kind of like, why? Like, where's the harm really? When your students came to you, did you feel like a harm necessarily, that angle, or based upon what you saw, or are we just underestimating our kids and how they're influenced?
So I think there's two types of people, you know. There's the type of person who's going to watching his videos. These are among teenagers and like early 20s. You know, among the ones who are watching, you know, some of them, they're mature, they're responsible, and they're going to his content and they're like, oh, he's talking to me about, masculinity. He's helping me to prepare for what I should be looking for a Muslim sister for marriage. He's telling me about a man is responsible for taking care of women. You better start, getting yourself in shape. You better, be ready to take care of a family and things like that. So these are all amazing, positive messages. And I think when he's saying it, there's kind of a vacuum that they have. They probably didn't see their fathers. They didn't have a strong father figure who was demonstrating this type of confidence, this type of courage, and speaking their ideas. And they're like, this is kind of like theoretically what we know about what Islam teaches. So it resonated with them, And there's a few people, I would say, that they already kind of exaggerate a little bit to the other extreme. So they would come and they'd be like, oh, look, I listened to here's another tape clip that I came across. He was talking about how women don't take responsibility while driving and they're bad drivers and they're this and that. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like that's not a very nice comment to make. And I'm like, but you know what? Overall, I already know that person who came with that clip. He already had ideas like that. He was already saying dumb stuff like that anyways, right? So he just latched on to something like that. Do I think that, all of a sudden, now that clip is going to influence all the other brothers? No, I don't see that happening, right? So I think people go to personalities, they're searching for something. And if they get good content that you can't find anywhere else, and it empowers you and it makes you feel good, it makes you a better Muslim, it makes you better prepared for, just prepared for life, to be ready for success, it makes you want to do more stuff. Alhamdulillah, that's great. And yeah, there's going to be some bad stuff. Like I said, I heard one or two comments from, two of these kids, and they're like, I'm like, that's ridiculous. That you shouldn't take what this guy's saying when it comes to that comment. But I know these guys. They already make those comments in it. They're like punk teenagers sometimes making dumb comments, right? So I'm like, what? At the end of the day, I know that it's resonating with them, but they're actually getting the other good content. So that's kind of my impression that I generally got. These are not kids who are gonna that are coming. They're not gonna go find some random person and find dumb videos and share it with the Shaykh during a halaqah dinner or something like that. They're genuinely coming and they're like, you know what, this guy, you should really look into what this guy is saying, because he's providing an outlet. He's saying something that we've been wanting other shuyukh to say, like the famous celebrity sheikhs, and we're not getting that messaging from him. I'm a small one, so they're not complaining about me, but they're like, in the ones who we regularly listen to, we're not getting that messaging, right? And they kind of feel sometimes they get it with me on a small level. They're like, we wanted to share this with you. We want more of this. We want this encouragement. We want this boldness. We want to stop, tiptoeing around issues and just hit it straight. And I think that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, I know. I think with the 16-year-old kid, when they look at the community, they're just not seeing role models. You know what I mean? And then the content they consume. And I have another friend who's like, well, what about Khabib? I'm like, yo, but Khabib barely speaks English. You know what I'm saying? They're not. Andrew Tate is a master communicator.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, he was he did a podcast that was 5 hours long. You know what I mean? Who can talk for that long, right? But I want to segue back to Nabeel.
And not only that, a good point you brought up. It's they do listen to Khabib. I mean, they absolutely love Khabib. They watch every single, clip, every single lecture.
Right.
But Khabib is not going and talking, like you said. He's not talking about all the mainstream issues that people want to talk about. So we don't have that content. If we did, then you know what? It would have been filled. Probably Andrew wouldn't have been as popular because we have someone else doing it. But when you don't, someone's filling that vacuum.
Well, I think Andrew talks about. I'll give you an example before I pass the ball to Nabeel. In the Patrick Bet-David Valuetainment interview, which I think everyone should really listen to. This is before the conversion. This may be from about a month ago, I want to say. And he said something because people say, "What's he bring to the table?" He said something I thought was very, very micro but very profound. How many of us have lost our keys, or we're late? We're late to work, we're late to a meeting, we're late going somewhere because we can't find our wallet, can't find our keys. Nabeel, did you watch that interview? The one with Valuetainment? You know what I'm talking about? The example he gives is that when he has a system for where his keys and wallet and everything goes. And if it's not there, he punishes himself. If he was going to go buy himself a nice dinner, he says that's gone for the week, right? So I was just whoa, that's really it's really beneficial. But it's a detail that we like most of us just overlook. But how many of us get bit by that? Like these little things, right? A little tweak that I can be like, so now I'm cognizant of where I put my keys every day, right? So yeah, Nabeel, in your article, can you explain so I think I didn't understand your response, but you titled the article "The Fragrant Dispersion." What's with the title?
Yeah, so if you look at the book titles of any Islamic book on any of the furu of the Sharia or the sciences of our sacred tradition, they always have rhyming titles. And then the subtitle is really just the explanation of what that means.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's really just a nod to the tradition. I'm a big proponent of just tradition in general, and this is one thing I like about our tradition is all the books have rhyming titles. That's why one of the reasons why I love Musalsalat as well. I haven't had the opportunity to get the narration directly of some of them, but they're very appealing to me because there's like some sort of connection, and even the salawat, the form of the salawat that I recite or prefer to recite, they call it musalsal bil shafi'iyya. So I have like my teacher narrated the salawat to me and he gave me the isnad for it, going back to Imam Shafi. So I know those kinds of things are a big deal to me. So that's why I titled the article the way it is.
Gotcha. So you call him the Genghis Khan of the internet. Can you explain that?
So there's a statement attributed to Genghis Khan where it's like, let me just pull up the quote real quick just so I don't butcher it, where he apparently said, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." And it kind of vibes with what Muslims believe, right? It's like whatever faults you have, whatever bad that you do is gonna come back and bite you in the ass. And so for me, I look at Andrew Tate as the Genghis Khan of the internet in the sense that when he showed up, like he took the world by storm, and he just being who he is exposed everybody's weaknesses and exposed everybody's vulnerabilities, and that is why people are so triggered by him, because he shows them the lack in themselves. If you're not making enough money, he's a ultra high net worth individual. If you are fat and obese and out of shape, he's in excellent shape, in fighting shape. If you are an incel or just generally don't have success with women, it's not a big deal to us. But actually now it is a big deal because a lot of Muslim men can't get married. So if you are an incel, he has way too many women for one man than one man could ever need. And confidence. If you lack the ability to say what you want without fear of repercussion, he just says whatever he wants and gets away with it. I mean, there's a limit to even his abilities, but he just exposes everything that we can't do, and he does it in such an abrasive manner, and such an in-your-face manner that it can be very off-putting to some people, and you would react negatively to it, sort of like a Mongol horde come in and sacking Baghdad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say as well. I'll add to that people speak about his statements prior to Islam, right? And then some people say, okay, well, all right, he's Muslim now, but they don't like some of the things they see him posting, right? So I've had people talk about, okay, I don't trust that his conversion is sincere, right? And actually, I sort of feel like I have a pretty good sense of humor. And I remember when I first saw the video with him actually praying in the masjid, Now, I was watching it with my daughter, you know, and I was actually laughing. She said to me, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Well, I just hope he's just not up to some type of trick." He's just he go to the masjid, and he hadn't announced that he was Muslim yet, you know. But we saw the video that he was praying. I said, "Okay." I was like, so I just amazed him, mashallah, you know, because he had the Piers Morgan interview, and then all of a sudden now this video pops up, and during the Piers Morgan interview, he said he was Christian, right? You know, then now we have this. You know, he's in videos making salat, and to add on top of that, there were a lot of brothers who some people sort of placed in the category of like the alt-right, you know, who were very critical of him as well from the Piers Morgan interview. They said that, you know, all these guys, you know, throwing Muslims under the bus and things like that. You know, so I'm saying, okay, well, yeah, you know, so but then all of a sudden, you know, the conversion story came out, you know. But anyway, the basic point I wanted to make was that Genghis Khan, I think, is a good analogy, right? You know, but of course, you know, it's not complete. But because of him still having, I guess you say, some characteristics which may not be pleasing, right, to Islam, you know, after his conversion, I think we have to reflect upon the example of the Bedouin, right? You know, qalat al-Arab wa amanna. You know, the Quran talks about, you know, the Bedouin says we have faith. You know, qul lam tu'minu walakin qul aslamna. Rather, you know, you don't say that you have faith, rather you have accepted Islam. You know, and I think that he's done a pretty good job of actually showing some humility to say, okay, you know, I don't know anything. You know, I'm still learning. You know, but well, he's still himself, right? And I think that it's, you know, that we should let him be who he is, you know, but we sort of, with, you know, gentleness, sort of like pull his coat to what problems there may be with certain things that he's still doing, right? And one brother even, you know, he wrote me in private. This is an individual, he's not a lefty, he's not like a, you know, crazy right winger either, you know, but he was sharing with me some footage. One particular short clip was him talking about ISIS and saying that, you know, ISIS it represent real Islam, right? You know, I think that particular clip has been taken off of the internet, right? You know, but there was like these Christian or anti-Muslim Christians are actually showing, okay, Andrew Tate likes Islam because he thinks Islam is ISIS, right? You know, it's equivalent to what ISIS is, right? You know, and so one brother this particular brother was saying that he felt a bit suspicious of it too, because he was saying, okay, his father was in CIA, you know, it might be a plant, and I'm not sure. And I said to him, I said, well, okay, let's say that, you know, that's true. I'm sure, you know, his father's in the CIA. I mean, what unity is he going to disrupt among the Muslims, you know, by being a CIA plant, right? You know, and then if we say, okay, he's becoming Muslim to take advantage of the Muslim community, I say, okay, but in what way does he benefit by converting to Islam, right? How does he financially benefit, right? He's already super rich. He's already filthy rich, right? His conversion to Islam, if anything, might make him poorer, right? If he actually starts to do the right thing, right? You know, how does he benefit from an insincere conversion to Islam, right? You know? And I just told the brother, listen, if he's insincere, I don't care. That's his problem, right? That's his problem. We're not supposed to be concerned about that. If he's insincere, Allah, he's going to take care of him. He's going to handle it, right? You know, so we should not be so. Why are we so obsessed with him? I mean, you know, there's so many other people, you know, and Maheen and I, we sort of exchanged sort of text messages over the past week. You know, just, Dave Chappelle, he drinks wine, right? Still smokes. Mike Tyson, you know, he's doing mushrooms and he's smoking weed online. I mean, you go to Kyrie Irving's, like his Twitter page, and he has pinned at the top, like, blatant shirk, right? You know, and I'm just like, okay, you know, I'm basically saying he's God, right? You know, you all say the same thing. Yes, call yourself God, you know, call yourself Yahweh and all these other things. You know, so in other words, the point is not to say that we all should be in condemnation of Mike Tyson or Dave Chappelle or Kyrie Irving. You know, rather the point is that if we are now outraged by them, we should not exhibit the same type of outrage towards Andrew Tate, right? Because again, it takes a time. It takes time. Islam is a marathon. People, and we should be available to teach. And he's not going to learn from our words. He's going to learn from our actions, right? That's how Islam spread. Islam didn't spread through somebody being given like a whole bunch of copies of Quran or being shown some beautiful video about the beauty of Islam, right? This is if the non-Muslims see this and they're going to all convert, or even being even through debate. It wasn't even through debate. We had a debate with a bunch of atheists, in the Persian Empire or whatever, and then it all became Muslim. No, that's not the way that it worked. It didn't work that way. It spread through adab, through akhlaq, and people saw something special about the Muslims, right? They accept, Muslim rule, right? As minorities, we ruled as minorities for centuries, right? And then all of a sudden, people started to accept Islam,
I think people have so one thing that the Muhammad did you brothers all watch the Muhammad hijab interview?
Yeah,
Part of it.
Yes.
Part of it.
Yes.
There was one pushback that Muhammad hijab got, which I was wanting him to ask, is that, and I alluded to this in the beginning, and maybe Nabeel can confirm. My understanding is that Andrew made his initial my understanding is that kickboxing in and of itself doesn't make you really rich, even if you're a world champion. That I thought his biggest business venture early on was this whole webcam business, which I understand you got these like girls who go on these webcams and like, some guy pays their service and they do stuff for them on the camera, right? So I think people want to know about that. Like, even if you convert, if you make your income from something of that sort. Now, I don't know if that's all his income, because he says he's a multimillionaire now. But maybe that's not all the money, and maybe Nabeel can elaborate a little bit about that. But like, when you have something like that in the past, and I think that's if I were to listen to everything, that's where people will be like, okay, I don't, the sex trafficking part, that seems like a stretch, right? But if you're running a porn business, essentially, that's what I told my wife. He's running a porn business, but she was like, if he became Muslim, then whatever, like, we'll work that out later. You know what I mean? But like what responsibility does he have when he's got income from things like that in the past? If any responsibility.
Yeah. So you're right. He didn't make a lot of money from kickboxing, because kickboxing is not like boxing or UFC. It's not as popular and there's not as much money in it. He made his initial fortune, like his first like few millions, doing the webcam business. My understanding is that now after a few years, he shut that webcam business down, and now his money is in a lot of other things. I know his brother still might do a little bit of management of women with OnlyFans on the side, or not on the side, but they have his brother has a business related to that. But I know they have, all of their finances are sort of mixed together in one big pool. So you can't really distinguish from the halal from the haram. But I will say that the majority of his ventures or his money, as I understand it now, is through, business. And I don't know. I don't know what the percentage is, but the majority is through business. If you think about his membership community, Hustlers University, he was making more than $5 million a month from that at one point, and he probably will as soon as they relaunch it. He'll probably make more than that as soon as they relaunch it. But dwarfs the money that he made from just that venture alone. That dwarfs anything that he would have made as a webcam manager, a webcam business manager. And on top of that, I made this point to another brother who commented on one of my posts. I was like, I don't know if all of my wealth is halal. I don't know if 100% of my wealth is halal, because I work with a lot of different clients doing a lot of different things. I work in marketing, which is selling, and then I know there's a hadith about the salesman is the one who lies the most, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing very crudely, but it's very easy to make up or to tell lies as a salesperson. And so I'm basically an online salesperson, and it's I have to be very cognizant of the fact of the type of language that I use. So I don't even know if my wealth is 100% halal, and vast majority of Muslims working like regular 9 to 5s in a company just getting a salary, they don't know that either. But then, we just sort of put it out of our mind. The only difference is that you have a very visceral example of somebody with haram wealth and halal wealth, and it's obviously there's the haram that's in it is the porn, and obviously that triggers a lot of feelings inside of Muslims as well. I mean, he probably has other haram income as well, but honestly, I think the vast majority of his wealth right now is from halal business, those kinds of sources.
I have a question about so there's one of the things I've seen on Twitter is that, okay, we know when you convert, all your sins are forgiven, right? But then there's this, okay, I'm reading this tweet right now from some, I just was searching Andrew, like, just going back to the date of Shahada, because all of the sins that involve him and Allah may be forgiven, and we cannot question that. But being a prime actor in creating an environment in which Muslim women feel unsafe can only be addressed by seeking forgiveness from Muslim women. And this isn't really complicated. I think it is, the way they said it. There's also this entire idea that brothers supporting Andrew Tate's conversion, and is being worded in different ways. We are moving Muslim women away from the faith.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
Quick? All right. So I saw this one a Muslim woman tweeting something in a similar vein, talking about how Andrew Tate and the Muslim men who support him are negatively affecting the faith of Muslim women. This is a Muslim woman. She used to wear hijab. She took her hijab off a long time ago, and she hasn't put it back on. So Andrew Tate has nothing to do with your faith. Mm-hmm. Like what are you talking about? You have problems with your faith going back years, and so I think part of the reason of this is because we stopped teaching Aqidah. We stopped putting a focus on Aqidah, and because the Salafi dawah isn't as strong before, so now we don't have people on the pure manhaj who haven't read Qalatul Usul and Nawaqid al-Islam, and they haven't memorized these books, and this is the problem,
I would say that it's more so, and I think Nabeel is not really saying anything different than this, but that the Muslims, the main critics don't have a Quranic paradigm. They don't approach moral issues from a Quranic or an Islamic paradigm, right? It's not from Quran or Sunnah, right? And so I've interacted with some sisters on my page about Andrew Tate, and those sisters generally seem to like me, right? But I remember one of them had posted something from Daniel, and they were saying that Daniel was pretty much saying the same thing as Andrew Tate, and she was offended by what she was saying, and it was related to the hitting birds, right? And at the moment I looked at it, and I could see that she was taking Daniel out of context, and Daniel didn't say what she was claiming he was saying, right? And then Tate wasn't saying what she was claiming he was saying either, right? But I just told her, I said, well, I understand where you're coming from, but even I don't deny that the word in the Quran, uses hit. Right? That is the word, right? Now, of course, the question of, okay, it challenges a Muslim woman's faith. Are Allah's words challenging your faith? Or are the Prophet's words challenging your faith, right? And that itself, like I said, it is complicated, right? It's very complicated. It's not as simple as, okay, well, we're offended and this guy challenges our faith. Why does he challenge your faith? He challenges your faith because he perhaps is reinforcing some things that you know from the faith, right? And know from our historical tradition, right, to be true, or at least would say attributed to the Prophet, ﷺ, right? And perhaps you have a misunderstanding of those issues, or even if you have the proper understanding of the issue, you just are not willing to accept that this is what Allah has revealed, right? Or you refuse to acknowledge that if I don't understand this, then at least I don't deny or challenge God's wisdom. So if God revealed this, then He must have had a wisdom behind it, right? So So I think often this is really what we're dealing with is that what they call the misogynistic hadiths, like the Muslim feminists, for instance. A lot of our sisters are influenced by that particular ideology, right? The feminist ideology, which is rejects the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, things that that they find they consider to be sort of misogynistic, right? From it, and in one sense, I understand it hurts your feelings, So we do have to be very gentle with them when it comes to these issues, right? But at the same time, I don't think that, and I think often what happens with a lot of imams who are sort of like, sort of crowd pleasers, right? Being crowd pleasers to the sisters, or sort of, like sometimes, of course, I don't like to use like the names like simp and those type of things. Like, I don't really like to call people names, but you have a lot of that going on. We've seen imams, sort of celebrating sisters posing for Playboy, right? And all this type. So it's like, well, there's a crisis. There's a leadership crisis, right, that we're having, right? In our community, and that has to be resolved, right? For one, right, and then the second thing that has to be resolved is that we have to bring Muslims back to understand what the Quran expects of us, right? What the Sunnah expects of us, right? And I think that we've gotten too far away from that. Many of the people who are spending all this time on social media, I wonder how many of them are getting up for Fajr and praying, right? I wonder how many of them are reading the Quran on a regular basis. So we have a number of problems, but it definitely starts on the level of leadership.
Shaykh Mustafa, with you're involved with Amja, the Fiqh Council of North America. What Shaykh Abdullah alluded to, I have one imam or sheikh friend who more or less told me that he does have to tailor his messaging to the sisters because of the that's where the money's at. You know what I mean? you can't cut off the cash cow. I'm curious if Shaykh Mustafa, if in your conversations recently with any of the mashayikh in your circles with Andrew Tate's conversion, what's the general? Because I know some mashayikh won't just say will stay silent. They might obviously be celebrating his conversion, but they won't say anything, because if they do, it's just gonna be bad news. They're just gonna get like just drilled on Twitter or Facebook or any social media, right? Yeah. But like, what's your behind the scenes experience so far? Could you give a quick assessment of that?
Sure. Two things. I mean, one, most people who are over 30, over 40, they're not sitting online very much. So they're not really following these details. They're not on TikTok. They're not, watching all these clips. So they don't really know who Andrew Tate is until, recently they know about it, but they're not going to, really understand how popular this person is and how much, the youth are following him and all that stuff. So on the one hand, they simply don't care, right? It's like, what, it's not a big deal. It's not really worth addressing. On the other hand, those who do know and those who are kind of in touch, yes, they're definitely afraid of what's happening. It's not because it's about the money or something like that. Is that people like to pick their battles, and especially when you're young and you're kind of like trying to launch your career. And I think especially, when you get on social media and stuff, it becomes this popularity thing. You want to get more likes. You don't want to get dislikes. Nobody wants to get canceled. People are afraid of, losing their, audience in a masjid or something like that. So there's definitely that sentiment, and I'll give you an example. I was just talking to one of the imams this morning, imam in SoCal. He had a youth group where he actually discussed Tate's conversion in the youth group. And he tried to make it as balanced as possible. He said, let's talk about like two different narratives. So they presented one narrative of people who, are happy, one narrative of people who are upset, and this and that. And there were like, I think he said like two sisters or something like that. They got triggered just talking about the subject. They started shaking, they started crying. And they walked out, in the middle of his program. And he's like, I spent 40 minutes buffer time kind of building up to the subject before I even got into it. And they couldn't handle it, and they left. And I think that's, see, someone like him, alhamdulillah, he's one of those people who's like, you know what, I'm gonna approach it wisely, but I'm still gonna talk about it because it's important. So you do find people like that, and I'm very happy to find people like that. You do find another segment of people who have a very large following, who are very popular. They're afraid of saying anything because you're gonna have trigger, reactions like that. And they're saying, what kind of damage am I doing to this person? And then what's going to happen to me? And all her friends will, be, looking bad at me, and it's going to mess up my ability. Here's the problem. The problem is really, it's like, what? Well, imams should speak the truth, right? So like, why not just speak the truth? I think the way I've heard this many times, the way that it gets justified, self-justified, we all do sometimes, self-justification sometimes, but the self-justification that I've heard is, these sisters who are getting triggered like this, they don't go to any other religious figures. I'm one of the few figures that they actually follow. So if I say something to lose them, then they've lost their connection to like any scholarship or any imam or any leadership or something like that. So that's the self-justification. My response is, I say, that sounds really nice. But at the same time, if they're not going to get the truth from you, then what exactly are they getting from you?
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, what exactly are they supposed to be learning from you if you're simply going to say things which they already agree with, right? If you're only going to say the things that they agree with, then they haven't actually learned anything new from you. You haven't been able to challenge them, So I think that's kind of my take on it. And I think the problem is really, when it comes, this story that I just gave you, it's really relevant to the discussion because people are having trigger reactions at Andrew Tate, what he says, and his conversion and Muslim brothers' support for Andrew Tate, because these two girls, for example, they had abuse in their past, right? So it's understandable why they're having that reaction, right? Mm-hmm. Having the reaction is because they looked at a clip. They heard about a clip. I don't know, whatever, the machete in your face clip, or one of these clips of Andrew Tate that's like, that's controversial, right? And whatever the context, they don't know it. They don't know the context. They didn't watch the long form of the thing. They don't know the context of the question that was asked or anything like that. They don't even know when it was said, in which context it was said, or anything like that. But they heard this thing, and they're like, you know what? This statement and this clip is encouraging other Muslim men to go and commit violence against women. And then this triggers that trauma of the violence that they encountered themselves in their own life. So it comes back down to two things. One is that actually what Andrew has been promoting? Like, does that clip actually, is that representative of, number one, was he promoting actual violence against women? Should men actually take a machete and like do that? Would he do something like that? Number two, are Muslim men all of a sudden, who would have been completely, peaceful and not do anything like that, are they going to start doing that because Andrew said it? And number three, when someone has trauma, right? This is a trauma. It's called a trauma response. When somebody has trauma, what they want, this is well known in psychology, they want the rest of the world to adapt to their trauma, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem is that's not fair to the rest of the world, number one. Mm-hmm. And number two, it's actually not good for their own recovery in the long run. Right? So I think that's really important for people to understand when we're looking at an issue like this.
MashaAllah, very well said. Yeah, I agree with that.
Can I say something real quick about the machete clip?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's mentioned and the clip is still out there, and there's like nobody knows the actual context of that clip because nobody has actually watched the long form version. So the machete clip is obviously it's comedy, and the second thing is that it's Tate reacting to his woman coming after him with a machete, and so he's explaining what's going to happen if that happens. It's like it's sort of trying to put into context the difference in physical ability between a man and a woman. So the actual context is the woman is coming after him with the machete because he cheated on her. So it's not funny, but it's funny. You know what I mean? And then he is basically explaining to the audience how he's going to deal with that. Obviously, there's violence against women involved, but that is the context. So in this context, it's one is comedy, and two he's explaining self-defense. To be honest,
yeah, and obviously, and he's also he's been vulgar and he's been hyperbolic, right? About
yes, exactly.
And I think that this is that's the part that really throws people for a loop, is that when you see it. And that's just why I say that, even though this was before his conversion, right? If he still endorses that, then I see it. Okay, he's like the Bedouin, right? The Bedouin, they're gruff, they're not cultured yet. It's going to take some time, right? So let's treat them like the Bedouin, right? Be patient with the Bedouin, right? And I think that we'll be all the better for it. They think, stop going to his page. Stop, and that's what I've been telling these sisters, they've been tagging me in posts, and I said, I untag myself. I said, listen, stop worshiping Tate, right? All the zikr of Tate, and then get off social media, go do something different. Right? He's not the only thing that exists. If anything, he's not the most important thing that exists, right? Your obsession about him for nothing, to no avail, right? On top of that, the people you're talking to, right? They already understand, right, what's right and wrong about what he says and what he does, right? So you're not really converting anyone, right? You're preaching to the choir, right? And the people who actually might need to hear those things, you're not talking to that person, right? So, but it's too much outrage, and so, but I would also just come back to what I was saying before, that like what Shaykh Umar described about, these decisions that imams are making. And, again, crisis of leadership. There's a crisis of leadership when you have a person or people who are supposed to be leading, right, the community, right, and supposed to be giving them the truth, right, afraid, right, to do so, right? Or they lose their job, or they're going to get canceled in some fashion, or, might not be able to find another job because of the way that our community is organized, and that's not a good thing, right? That, and you can find this on all levels. You go into the national organizations, I imagine it's the same thing. On that level, is that you have individual people making decisions out of fear and anxiety, right? Such a person cannot lead us in the right direction, right? And we have to come to grips with that and understand that we have harmed ourselves a great deal because of that, because of just simply giving people what they want to hear, and then we haven't grown in our faith, right? So people see Islam without saying it. They see Islam as oppressive, as tyrannical, et cetera, right? And so when actually Islam actually appears, true Islam appears to someone. And I'm not saying that, Andrew Tate represents true Islam. No, I'm not saying that. I know some people want to say that that's what I'm suggesting. Yeah. But much of what he said is in accord with Islam. You just sort of refine the language a bit, right? He's already there. It's very clear to me listening to much of what he said, and especially the interview with Muhammad Hijab. I'm listening to him talk, and I'm going to say, I'm thinking of this ayah from the Quran, I'm thinking this hadith from the Prophet. So I said, when he says so many different things, I said, he's already there, right? Has a much better understanding than a lot of Muslims actually know, right? So it's a big problem to just simply be catering to the crowd, being a crowd pleaser, and it causing all of this harm. That's really why the outrage exists, in my opinion.
So Sheikhs Abdullah and Sheikh Mustafa, especially Sheikh Mustafa, basically with your affiliation with these national organizations. So it's I have husnul done of our imams in general in America still. That most of them behind the scenes agree with 95%. We're all on the same page, right? They're afraid of being canceled. Do you think that fear is legit? Do you like who's gonna that's what I'm saying. If all the imams in America got together in a room in a conference, and because it seems like there's this the noisy people or the people there's these crazy ladies on Twitter who some of them they live in my city, but they're nowhere to be seen, right? They might be academics, they might be teaching at universities. I just think they're just a loud minority that has no on the ground relevance. And I think if the imams just got together and just made a stance this is what we're about, and we're not gonna like soften our message because I'm seeing it like a lot of shuyukh that I even respect. I'm like, why are you guys like you guys are purposefully leaving stuff out just to like because of someone's because you're sensitive, overly sensitive, and not addressing their root cause, right? I mean, it might be one of those things we gotta take the Band-Aid off. But I my theory is that like no one's gonna cancel y'all.
No, I totally agree. I believe that the vast majority of our community, right, they support us as well. The vast majority of the community are in line with real Islam, right? That's been my experience. Anytime I've gone to a masjid, given a talk, given a khutbah in particular, and I'm talking about something controversial, something that goes against sort of that crazy, leftist, feminist sort of narrative, that most of the people in the masjid have no problem with it at all. There's always one or two people will come and say something, complain, and then unfortunately somebody on the board of the masjid, they'll listen to that one individual or two people, and then it'll cause a major major issue, right? Yeah, but I'd like to hear from others as well.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with that sentiment. Just let me put a disclaimer out there. I don't think all the popular imams, all the celebrity imams are. I'm not saying that they're cowards or that that they're afraid or something. I think they're trying to pick their battles. So, like, if you look at some of them, when it comes to standing up, against Israel, very vocal. When it comes to standing up on certain, civil rights issues or something like that, even if they can get under fire, they're also very vocal about that. So there's certain issues that they're very vocal about, and I think this issue that we're talking about right now, and they're okay if they lose some followers on those other issues, right? But this issue in particular, I do think that either, again, I don't know their niyyah, but either they're afraid they're going to get canceled, or they just simply don't see it as such a big issue, or they're saying, I think this requires a lot of nuance. And what happens is when you put in too much nuance, you actually water your message down. So they may be saying stuff about this, but it's so watered down with so much nuance, trying to address so many different crowds that it feels like they're not saying anything. Do I think if they were more forceful and very clear, would they get canceled? No, they wouldn't get canceled the way that Tate got canceled, right? Are they going to lose some followers? Yeah, I mean, they might lose 10% of their followership, or they might lose 20%. But you know what? They probably gain another 10 or 20%. And even if they didn't, my view is that, there's more barakah in a 20% following that actually is, adhering to the truth and benefiting from you, than 80% artificial Facebook friends and thumbs up and likes and mashallahs that don't actually mean anything. So I think that's something we got to remind ourselves all the time, because there's a massive temptation in this world of social media and popularity and likes and everything like that. There's a massive temptation for everyone to just kind of cater to the crowd. And I think we always have to just check our niyyahs and see what we're doing. And every time we say something or think about doing something, we need to stop and question, say, why am I really doing this? And what am I really going to achieve? And what should I actually be doing as a religious leader or as an influencer or whatever?
But you mentioned Israel and civil rights. The thing of that, that's more intra-community. That's more convenient because a lot of our left-leaning brethren are on the same page with that, right? And I think that, and some of them, even Palestine, I used to give a lot of people credit for Palestine. Okay, there are people who are left-leaning activists. I'm like, yeah, but they help out in Palestine and stuff. But now you start to realize, well, their interest in Palestine is actually rooted in some kind of like weird intersectionality, nothing to do with like preserving like Quds and Aqsa. You know what I'm saying? Or it's very minimal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, things have changed. 20 years ago, like a man to grow out his beard was really tough, man. Like I got so much flack from my family and for everything. And then later on, and it meant a big deal if like you were a Muslim man, you got like a pretty decent sized beard. Like it means like this person takes their deen seriously. But then, like, fast forward 15 years later, everyone and their mother, sorry, not their mother, but it is their mother too, unfortunately, in the world that we live in. But like, everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim, like beards became fashionable. So like what you're saying is that there was a time where it really had a lot of value. It had a lot more value when you were saying something for a cause and you're going to get a lot of pushback, right? And now that has changed. You know, it's changed maybe on Palestine. It's changed on certain issues. That, you know, speaking about, you know, masculinity or addressing some of the extremist elements within feminism, whether second wave or third wave feminism, it's highly unpopular. So yeah, do I think it's harder to do that? Yes. Do I think it needs to be done? Yes, it definitely needs to be done. Do I think people are afraid to do that? I definitely think people are afraid to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that I don't know if it's gonna. I don't know if it requires them to. I saw a post the other day that I shared with Nabeel. It was on a Facebook post about a brother going on a rant. There was some man that made a post about like secret marriages or polygamy, and then it was shared.
California.
Oh yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, I don't know the chick, but like
I know what I say. He's not Shaykh, by the way.
he's not okay.
Yeah.
But there was a reply by a brother who's been very active in the community for like decades, and you know he's been involved in like some like organizations that have been like long standing. And I read it and I was like, I haven't kept with his brother. Like maybe he got like, but it's like this dude took the red pill. It seems like he just got, but it seems like he went through some experience that he got run through the grinder by some sisters, right? He didn't specify who, but I think that's what's got to like. I would hate for the imams to like wake up in one way and just be like either with their own, because some of them it could happen in their own marriages, unfortunately, or it has happened, but they haven't diagnosed the problem that their wives like really that was. I mean, Sheikh Abdullah, this whole what they call simping, right? Which you know it's a derogatory term in a sense, but like this idea where you're trying to cater to this feminine narrative, right? And often you see them maybe getting divorced. You don't know why, but we do know that when we do research on this stuff, even from a non-Muslim angle, this affects like our relationships with our spouses, right? Because you're removing this polarity. You know what I mean? Now, some of them are waking up, they got divorced and they're like, okay, this is all pipe dream, right? And I'm kind of like waking up to this reality. But some people are like, oh, it's just like, the definition of insanity. They'll get remarried and it's the same story, or it got worse, or they blame. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know how you guys fix it. But maybe that's a topic you guys. I don't know if this is something that Amjad could actually talk about. But I think your scholarship, I'm just like maybe it's like older generation. It might be like what is this? It might be like a more youthful thing.
It's gonna be like an Amjad like official position with the signatures of all the scholars about Tate. Official fatwa on Tate.
Well, I mean, I think it's a lot about like the response we have to the people in the manosphere, right? I mean, Nabeel, you've kind of like fallen off the grid with most of like the people hate like in the Muslim sphere, right? I don't see as much hate towards you anymore. A couple of years ago, it was like what?
You know the funny thing is when I was becoming the Alpha Muslim, people would tell me, why don't you be more like Daniel? He's more academic. He's quoting, you know, he's using logical arguments, and you're just like this crazy figure. And now Daniel became me, and now he's like this, there's always going to be a Joker, Batman Joker kind of scenario, right?
Right.
So the reason like Daniel exists, and Daniel has to exist so that Shuyukh like Abdullah bin Hamid and Mustafa Umar can do their work, and like Dr. Shadi and other sort of even if you talk about people who are speaking against the global homo agenda. People like Muhammad Hijab, because if Daniel didn't exist, Muhammad Hijab would be the target, right? So there always has to be a Nabeel-like figure in the online discourse, like doing the Joker thing, right? And so that's just one point I wanted to mention.
No, but you know, I mentioned Nabeel because this is I told Nabeel, I told you this story before. I've never told you who it was, but there's a very prominent imam who you came across his radar, right? And I remember I was telling him when I was with the Mad Mamluks, we were like maybe a year and a half in. I was trying to you know, we were trying to pitch him to come on the show, and I was showing him like, you know, who we've had on, and he's scrolling through, and he's just like, "Oh, it's Nabeel Azeez guy. Yeah, I've seen him online. I don't like him. He's a racist. He's a misogynist. He's this XYZ, right?" And then he was just he came on the show later. It's not like he was like, "I'm not coming on your show because you guys had Nabeel Azeez." But in the same conversation, we ended up talking about someone else in our community who a sister who was like active in one of the, you know, that MLI initiative, right? This is before, and then she ended up having like an affair, like, you know, an open affair and everything. And now we didn't know that at the time, but he was just like, you know, I don't agree with everything, but I see a lot of points in this. With you, it was like black and white. This guy is like a straight up Fasik. And then with this other sister, it was just like, it's just there's like nuance, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like I don't know how he got there. And Sheikh Mustafa and I were talking about this when he was in Chicago, like when you came to Chicago. Like it kind of just snuck up on us. Like there's this idea that, because the sisters that I was in MSA with, man, they were mad conservative. Like we had sisters at MSA that they were trying to be co-wives to go to Damaj. You mentioned like the Salafi Dawah. They were trying to get on the Hijra train, even if it meant being like co-wives, right? And it's like out of nowhere, it kind of transformed it. Like we've become submissive to the whims and desires of any random loud lady. And I think that's been the real problem. And how do you now, and that's what I meant, the imams got to get together and like get consensus, like, okay, this is going to be our approach. Stop dilly-dallying around the issue. Because even myself, I've been guilty of that. I've been trying to like, you know, extend olive branches to people and whatnot. And then you kind of realize that they don't care. They're not like, it's the line of the Terminator, you know? Which the Terminator has no remorse or fear or like emotion, and it will not stop until you are dead.
Yeah. It's you know, Nassim Taleb writes about this. He calls it the tyranny of the minority. It's like, and he gives different example, and he uses Salafis as an example as well, where it's like you have one Salafi in a congregation, and now everybody's going to be praying feet together, saying Ameen loudly, with the, you know, doing what is it? What is the opposite? What did the Malikis do with the hands down? What is that called? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So so they like, they'll, you know, put their hands up. They won't pray with sadr because you automatically, you're going to focus on the loudest voice, and I, not to sort of desecrate the high station of, you know, the imams and scholars and things like that, but money has a lot to do with it as well. More and more Muslim women are, you know, working, making their own incomes. You know, they most of the time they don't have to spend on the household if the husband is taking care of that, and so they're able to donate more to your Islamic centers, your masajid, your you know, scholarly initiatives, and so just, you know, follow the money. Where does the money come from? And so that's, yesterday I posted a comment on Facebook. It's like, you know, if getting a job in a masjid is your dream job, then that's having low expectations yourself. Be the imam, that's good, and, you know, that's good and necessary, but a scholar or an imam should be financially independent. I actually got a message back from an imam ratib in one of these masajid, I think in Texas or something, and he asked me, you know, what are the options? I would love, you know, to have like you know, a way out. And so I told him, like, oh, you know, start a business, you know, become a consultant. You have skills that people will pay for, and if not, you can get those skills. And the reason why Tate is able to say the things he says and do the things he does is because he's financially independent. He can get canceled. He can, you know, Stripe no longer works with him. He doesn't have access to like his Gmail got canceled. Like it wasn't just getting his social media accounts deleted. It was everything. And so he was able to, because he is financially independent, he was able to build his own payment processor. He actually started his own bank in Estonia to process the payments, right? And he's built his own, you know, infrastructure from the ground up so that he can't be canceled. And so if you're financially independent, if your salary is not dependent, if your income is not dependent on a bunch of doctors and lawyers who think they're better than you, and making sure that you stay in line or you'll get fired. If your salary is not dependent on that, you can say whatever you want. So I think this is an important point, that yes, it's going to take away from your ability to study and teach and do the things you do, because you're going to be busy and learning an income. But I asked this Imam Ratid who messaged me, like, how many of the OG imams and scholars, all they did was study and teach, and how many of them actually had trades and did business and and were able to be financially independent that way. So I think that's an important issue.
I think the imams probably would benefit a lot to have financial advisors, investment advisors, right? In other words, I don't think it's realistic to have the imam actually work in an additional job, right? Even I like, for instance, lampposts. Like for me, it's more like a side thing, So I have my regular job as a tuna. I don't really. Most of the work is done by someone else, for me, and it's not like, for instance, financially, we don't make a lot of money, right? In other words, like that. But it would seem to me like, for instance, if we had someone who actually knew like the right type of things to invest in, and they say, hey, there's this new product coming out and everything, this it's cheap right now, and you get imams can become rich, through investments. I think that's more realistic, in our own particular time, right? But yeah, it's definitely everyone chooses their battles. No one speaks about every issue, right? Even Tate, I've noticed there's certain things he doesn't speak about. Like, he doesn't talk about the Palestinian-Israeli sort of, issue. He doesn't, and I think it's smart. I don't think it's good to just, I got to say something about everything, right? Because we do have to acknowledge at a certain point, there are just different levels of power. Some people more powerful than others. There's some people can really cause greater damage to your life than others can. Look at like, Kanye, right? For instance, what's happening with him right now, with Ye now, right? So Ye, right, what's happening in his situation, he's sacrificing a lot, but I'm not sure if it's going to have the intended effect of creating a revolution, right? Because some people respond. Kyrie, you see how he responded as well, right? So everyone, like for instance, even though I've always been very vocal about many things, even before I came to Zaytuna and even after I came to Zaytuna, right? I'm under no sort of like illusions about why I'm able to say certain things and do certain things. So for me, I don't judge as harshly imams who don't say things that I do say. Right? I have often people, they inbox me and they say, hey, I really support what you're doing, mashallah. And I understand that they can't come out publicly and say certain things. But the ones I really have the problem with are those who don't say the right things and they lie to people, right? The community. And what they also do is they attack people like me, right? And I've said, okay, well, I would have respect for you if you just chose to just not comment or actually direct your comments to someone like me. If you maintain silence because, okay, that your situation is precarious, I totally understand it. I get it, But when you actually choose to now attack me or someone else, like Shaykh Mustafa or something, now I don't have any respect for you at all, right, at that point, right? You have no excuse in my book at that point,
They call it punching right.
Punching right?
Yeah, punching right. So it's like you have people on the right wing, and some of them are closer to the center than others, and some of them are more further right. Yep. And so in order to engage in some sort of like respectability politics, they will denounce the people to the right of them. But I mean, it doesn't get more right than orthodox mainstream Islam, right? So it's like, doesn't make sense. Like, you're already a Muslim, like why are you punching on the Muslims that are like more able to say the things that you can't say? So that's the situation that's going on there.
So we've got about like 20 minutes left, because I don't, Nabeel, you've got a hard stop.
No, my training got pushed back, so I don't have a hard stop anymore.
Oh, you don't? Okay. I wanted to kind of like talk about you in your, as we're just going through your article. You talk about So James Altucher actually had Tate on. Kind of surprising. It wasn't generally you wouldn't. I've consumed some of his content, but it kind of but kudos to him. You talk about, you reference it and say that people, Altucher says people have a good reason and a real reason, and so you go into it. You're saying that the criticisms of Tate by online Muslims are good reasons, but what are the real reasons? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. Before that, it was surprising to you. It's not surprising to anybody who's known Tate for more than this year, because James Altucher played Tate's father in chess, and then when Tate's father passed away, he wrote like a eulogy, an article praising Tate's father, and so they developed a relationship. So they've had a relationship for years. So it was sort of expected that James Altucher would have Tate on. So that's another thing that people have just sort of, and this is not really you because you've known Tate for more than 1 year, but people who have just caught on to Tate right now, they have no.
Actually, I think I've only learned of him like 8-9 months ago myself.
All right, so you
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, I've heard him in passing because originally it was like. By the way, does someone have any thing? Does anybody hear something in the background?
Yeah, I can hear
a little bit of buzzing.
Oh, is that Shaykh Mustafa? Probably. Okay. Yeah. So I remember because I remember hearing the name Cobra Tate, right? And that's Andrew, right? In the past, but just in passing, like I'd hear a guy named Victor Pride. That I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah.
Or these, so you hear people in passing, or Tucker Max, these random people, and in that context, I heard of some guy, but I had no idea who he was. And I think my first time I heard of Andrew was I heard him on the Fresh and Fit podcast.
Okay, so that's
fairly recent,
quite recent. Okay,
yeah.
So you're basically in the same boat. So you don't have the full context of Andrew's backstory and his sort of network and the sort of interlinked sort of people that we all know. But because I have a much longer experience with him, I know the context.
Right.
So that was one point. The other point is that, and so this is getting into a bit more kind of armchair psychology. But
so I actually want to pick a little bit at the first point. So because Abu American just posted some pictures of him and Andrew hanging out. It's kind of alluding to the same thing, that Andrew's he's been seeing the growth, the move towards Islam. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you were kind of alluding to, you in your interactions, because he talks about, even in the Patrick Bet-David interview, and it seems like that he grew up in Luton, right? And so that's where his interactions with Muslims first were real noticeable. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, that's another thing as well. So he's I guess he's always had Muslims in his circle, because he would always, even years ago, he would post WhatsApp conversations from his his basically harami Muslim friends, where it's they're going to the club with him, but they're posting about, or they're messaging him saying, you can find women at the clubs, but you can't find wives. Okay, but what are you doing at the club, akhi? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he's always had Muslims in his circle for a long time. His trainer is from Serbia or Bosnia. I think he might be a Bosnian Muslim. His name is Amir.
Okay.
So his coach, who he spent 20 years with, 20 years, maybe 10 years with, is a Muslim. So he would have had an influence on him. But to go back to the good reason, real reason. All right. So James Altucher's concept is this. He says people always have a good reason for the things they do, and that's the reason that they're going to tell you to your face. And it's a very it makes sense. It's a reason that I can accept. Sure, no problem that you can't do something. This is your reason. All good, man. Maybe next time. But then there's a real reason, the one that drove their decision, that nobody actually says out aloud. And that is the one that you need to try to understand. And obviously now I can't see into anybody's hearts, but I'll just speak in general. You have online Muslim figures who they present themselves as the real men in the Muslim community, and they're balanced, following the Sunnah, that kind of thing. And they present themselves as strong men. They practice MMA. One of them in particular, he has a habit of challenging people who he disagrees with to fights. So he's like, not like a real fight, but like sparring. So that's his trump card. He'll challenge them to a fight whenever he can't resolve the disagreement.
This is a real
And
person.
obviously, this is a real person.
Okay.
One of the people who's actually speaking against Tate. Okay. One of the more vocal voices against Tate right now after he converted.
Okay.
And so Tate comes along. Tate is a 4-time kickboxing world champion, and Tate can beat the brown off him, and put him in a coma. It's like there's no comparison. And so, yes, you're speaking out against Tate's fisk and fawahish, but what's the real reason? The real reason is that you're threatened. Okay. There's another scholar who his sort of lane is helping people with their finances. Okay. And helping people grow their wealth in a halal way. He's speaking out against Tate, but Tate has made more money than, he makes more money in a year than this scholar and his children will make in an entire lifetime. And so he's threatened. There's another da'i who says he gave up the street life, the kind of life that Tate sort of flaunts, to do the dawah, and he publicly exclaims how content he and his family is living in a tiny apartment, basically in squalor, and just getting by, just barely getting by, making ends meet. And Tate openly flaunts his wealth and encourages men and just people in general to get as wealthy as possible. So he's threatened. There's another apologist, polemicist, who for the past, I don't know, for forever, he's been in the sort of refuting misconceptions about Islam scene for decades. And he's got hundreds, possibly thousands of articles refuting the attacks against Islam, refuting misconceptions about Islam. And Tate comes along and he says these directionally accurate, but obviously, it's obviously imprecise and wrong things about Islam. Okay. But he does it in praise of Islam. And so this guy who spent decades refuting misconceptions and creating refuting attacks against Islam, he feels threatened, because here comes this guy who's much more popular than he is. One single interview that Tate does will probably get more views than his hundreds of articles will get in the entire existence on the internet. So he's threatened. And so in the red pill kind of manosphere pickup artist space, they call this AMOGing. It's AMOG. It stands for alpha male other guy. It's where you're trying to be the man, but some other guy comes in and he's more of a man than you are, and then he basically shows you up, and then you lose your status in the hierarchy. And what Tate has done, before, people had a trump card against Tate in that he was a kafir. It's like, yeah, he's a 100 million, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars, 4-time kickboxing world champion, harem of women. He's he's fit, he's a charismatic, but he's a kafir. Okay, but now that's gone because he's a Muslim. So he's our Muslim brother. So now, very clearly, the dominance hierarchy in the online Muslim space, not in real life, the dominance hierarchy has changed, and so all of the men, because we operate in dominance hierarchies, we are threatened.
I like the way that you put that, and I overall agree with it. What do you say? The real reason. What was the other one? The first one was
the good reason and the real reason.
The good reason, the real reason.
Like the good reason would be like he had a webcam business.
Right. Yeah. Exactly,
as an example. Okay.
But I think we need to be careful here too, because I think it could sound as if like we are just as guilty as those who question, for instance, sincerity of like Tate. So in other words, Tate became Muslim. He gave a shahada, and so people are like, I don't think he's really a Muslim. I think it's all fake, right? So we don't know what's in his heart. If we start talking about the good reason, the real reason, it sounds like we're saying that we know what's really in people's hearts. Now, I don't believe that that's what you're doing, right? But I'm just saying this so that people don't take advantage of that particular argument to say what I just said, was that okay? Well, our hearts, but we can't say we know Tate's heart, right? But fundamentally, what I look at is this: I look at consistency, right? So I look at, okay, Tate, unlike, again, Rami or Muhammad or Hassan Minhaj and Mike Tyson and Dave Chappelle and all these other people like that who are public Muslims, right? Or even like, okay, the Muslim politicians, the Muslim activists, et cetera, all these people, right, who have done things, who have said things that are very harmful, right, morally harmful, right, not only for themselves but for humanity overall, that we don't react and have not reacted the same way towards them as we're reacting towards Tate, right? Which tells me that the outrage is fake, right? Because if we're truly outraged with his sin, we will be outraged by all sin, right? And we will react exactly the same way, regardless of who the person be, which leads me to conclude that the only reason that most of you are reacting this way is because of political alliances, because of ideological differences. You don't like the fact that, again, that he for instance, he likes Trump, right? That he's opposed to feminism, and of course, I think there is something to say for those who are offended by the way that he speaks, has spoken to women in the past, and a lot of those clips that we do see, and I totally understand the visceral reaction to those type of things, and part of the blame, a large part of the blame on them reacting that way, in my opinion, has to do with leadership, not teaching them Islam in the right way, right? Whereas again, Tate comes and he has ideas that are related to manhood, about manhood, which are, I would say, are in agreement with what we know of the Quran and of the Sunnah, right? And they're not willing to embrace that. It's hard for them to embrace it because they've been taught for some time now that men and women are the same, and and all equal rights, equal responsibilities, all these type of things, and men don't have the right to speak about women's issues or to say this or say that, right? I think that a lot of it has to do with that. Their conditioning that makes it difficult for them to take that type of advice.
And Sheikh Abdullah, you mentioned those people who question Tate's conversion. Actually, I could lay out the argument for having a real conspiracy theory about Tate's conversion, because I actually know Tate. But and so there is a way to to sort of do the armchair psychologist route for Tate as well with regard to his conversion. You could say that he has business interests in Dubai, and for a long time now he's been speaking against this liberal world order, and his brother is more of a Christian, and so he's got that community locked down. And so Tate and his brother decide, okay, I'll become a Muslim and let me get this community locked down in terms of support. Okay, in terms of support. And so, and because Tate is a chess player, you could make the argument that he's playing chess, and this is the best move on the chessboard for him. But obviously, I have no idea what's in his heart. I just accept the Islam on the face of it. So there is, you're absolutely right. We could actually do that analysis on Tate that I just did, the good reason and the real reason. And you're absolutely right about that.
I think as well, like Nabeel has the unique perspective that him, right? And I think you alluded to this in an article that you got some pushback from some people when you say that, oh, I've met Andrew and Tristan and they're gentlemen, and that meant nothing coming from another Muslim. You know what I mean? And I think that's where it and you've always been like I was in the Mad Mamluks, and you tell us that, like, hey guys, if I'm causing you too much flack, don't worry about it. Like, it's not a big deal. But we were like, no, we know, like, I've met you in person. Like, I'm not gonna, like, even if like one of my Shaykh friends isn't a fan of you because they just saw some clip or saw something on Twitter. I'm like, no, I met the guy. You know what I'm saying? And we've talked on the phone several times over the last 5 years now, right? So I'm gonna go to bat for somebody that I've met personally, and and especially if there's no reason not to, there's nothing negative there, right? So I think people have to like give you, like, I would give you the slack in that when you write that write up, that I don't think everyone's needs to have Nabeel's understanding of Tate, because he's like a friend. I mean, you say he's an acquaintance, but he's somebody that it just, it's been all positive interactions, right? Not everyone, most of us are not going to have the opportunity probably to get that same perspective.
I mean, I don't expect everybody to just take my word for it, right? Obviously, especially people I don't know. But the interaction I posted in my article is between me and another brother who actually knows me. When he comes to Dubai, we've hung out before. And so he's sat with me on more than one occasion. And so unless he thinks I'm a fasik and he needs to verify what I say according to the verse in the Quran, like, my word should count for something. But it doesn't, because everybody's in their feelings and like everybody's like so online that they can't see, like, a foot in front of their face. And that's the problem that I'm seeing. And so this particular interaction, it bothered me because this guy, he unfriended me on Facebook, and so I think he's cut me off. But it's a problem. It's a problem.
I'm gonna say, yeah, like, so you and I are in the same wavelength here, because and to me, social media disagreements should not cause like enmity. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna have disagreements. I have a lot of friends I disagree with, especially with the amount of podcasts I've done. You meet people, when they become a guest, they become kind of like a friend. You stay to, so I definitely think, that's something that has been a lost art that we've let social media kind of take it over. I want to start wrapping up here. Shaykh Mustafa, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of polarization in the Muslim community, and there's a lot of polarization between men and women in Western society in general. And I think both of these things are extremely unhealthy. And sadly, the conversion/reversion of Brother Andrew is causing people to go more out to the extremes. And I think that's a very sad phenomenon, when we should be celebrating. We're very happy that we have a new brother who has accepted Islam, and we don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know how far he's going to go with this, but it has the potential to have great consequences, positive consequences for the Muslim Ummah. People have been waiting for another, like Muhammad Ali type figure, or, somebody who's going to bring izzah and bring like honor and respect to Islam. So that's a possibility. And I think it comes back down to spiritual problems, so even though it's bringing people apart, I think people need to look inside themselves, right? And they need to realize, well, where is this extremism on both sides? Where is it coming from? It's coming from a lack of understanding of what Islam actually teaches. And I think that's where we should always come back and look into our own hearts, look into our own minds, and think about what kind of elements have shaped our thinking, what kind of influences have corrupted our hearts, and we should focus on rectifying those things. I think this thing's gonna go away, after a month or 2 months or whatever. There's gonna be another thing that comes. It's gonna be another person, another issue, another podcast for you, whatever it may be. But the reality is that we need to get closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever circumstance Allah puts us in our way, we should really look inside of ourselves and check our hearts and check our minds and make sure they align with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches. So that would be my reminder for myself and for everyone else.
Shaykh Abdullah?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Shaykh Mustafa just said. And I would just add that Muslims have to remove politics, as the priority of their lives. They have to move that aside, and come back to, devotion, come back to the study of Islam, right? Get the proper understanding what Islam is, fulfill your obligations, right? Because it's clear that we don't have the leaders we need in our community. And of course, I'm not saying that I'm the leader, that, one of those leaders that people need in our community, but I just think that we don't have the leadership that we need in our community that will help us to preserve both our deen and our dunya, right, at the same time. And fundamentally that we lead by following, right? We lead by following is one thing after another, that we can never like sort of move first, until we get the permission from this party or that party, right? We did it, we're doing it with this, we did it with, lockdowns, with COVID, with all these other things as well. We're going to do it, but we're going to do the same thing with climate change. Watch, right? We're going to just follow. No one's going to have an original perspective, right, on any of these things, right, as we move forward, right? But we just need to leave it alone, get more concerned with our own souls, right, our own understanding of Islam, right, and politics is necessary, right, but it's not as important as our deen is, right? So there are no savers in the political realm, right? There are no savers there, right? But we vote our interests. We try to choose those who are going to help us preserve what we have more than anything else, and inshallah, hopefully, someone will sort of listen to that advice or find it to be valuable. If not, then hey, at least I try.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they'll take clips of what you said here and put them up on social media out of context. Nabeel, any final thoughts?
Yes, I have one. The best article on masculinity written by a Muslim or a non-Muslim is something that Dr. Abdullah wrote. It's called Prophetic Pugilism and the Freedom Principle. It's on almadina.org. He wrote it several years ago. Actually, it's 5 years ago now. I think you should put it in the description of the show notes of this video.
That'll cover. I was asked, like, where can people find out more about you? I mean, you've been on before, so I'll link Sheikh Abdullah's article there. Sheikh Mustafa, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
I have a website, askthescholars.com and mustafaomar.com.
And Nabeel?
Yeah, you can just go to muslimman.com is what I'm promoting right now. Muslimman.com.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you brothers coming on and talking about this topic. Hopefully we can put an end to this, like as the Tate Dicker, but I wanted to cover the topic because I think it's important, not from Andrew's point, who Andrew Tate is or the conversion, but how we react and the idea of what conversion means and salvation and the implication that comes with not liking someone's conversion or having hesitancy about things. So again, much appreciated. For the listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can become a patron at patreon.com/sultansandsneakers. If you can't support financially, at least please follow and share on the social media apps. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. For my special guests, Nabeel Azeez, Shaykh Abdullah bin Hamid Ali, and Shaykh Mustafa Umar, I'm your host, Maheen the podcaster, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.